Greetings from beautiful Funk Studios in Fargo, North Dakota, deep within the depths of the Supercharger Dead Zone. This is the Tesla News and Topics podcast for Friday, September 21st, 2018.
All right, I think we've got quite a lot of good news to talk about, and look forward to sharing that with you.
All right, hello again, everybody. Let's get started. My name is Jeff. Welcome back, and thanks for listening, as always. I'm going to jump to a couple of things. I have some items in the news to cover, just a few things. One of them is related to my Model 3 update, so I'm going to leave that one for when I get to the update on how that process is going, which has been fairly interesting up to this point. And then the topic I did want to go over, sort of basics of charging, EV charging for newbies like myself is sort of the topic for today. The reason I thought I would cover this is just because I myself had a lot of questions as I was trying to get ready. My Model 3, I'm expected to receive it just in a few days here on Monday the 24th. I have to go get it and bring it back. But we'll come back to that stuff. Let's jump into the news items here first. First up, really some great news. Tesla Model 3 got a perfect 5-star rating in every category from the National Highway Traffic and Safety Administration here in the U.S. They just released their data, and there's some actually really cool videos. I found this article first on Electrek, and so there should be a link to this in the show notes for today, but I'm sure you could find the videos online pretty easily that show the actual crash tests taking place. The videos are pretty neat to actually see, and they show, in particular, there's one I watched on the front collision, the front impact testing, and they have a crash test dummy in the front seat driver and also in the passenger seat, and you can see, the airbags go. They show different angles. They show from the side. They show actually from above the car. They show from below the car actually as well, and you can kind of see how the components within the front end sort of buckle and then flex to sort of decrease the deceleration and spread it out over time. It's pretty neat. What I thought was cool was that the crash test dummies basically, it looks like a perfect test. Their heads basically have paint on them, so whatever they hit will leave a mark. And as the airbags deploy, the crash test dummies, their faces basically hit exactly dead center on these airbags. So looks like an amazing job, and really kind of just follows up with S and X, which also have 5-star crash test ratings in every category. The X is notable for having extremely low rollover risk due to the fact that the center of gravity is so low and the battery packs. This story actually really got me excited because I've ordered the Model 3. I've seen one in person. I have actually never physically touched one. I've never sat in it. I've driven an S. I've driven an X on test drives, rented an S for a short period of time. But it really made me feel good knowing that the car that I've ordered has been verified to be, as safe as it can be. And certainly in my line of work, most of you probably know by now, if you've been listening to the show, I'm a practicing emergency physician. So there have been times at work where I've seen things and I thought, sheesh, if they just had, if the main compartment of the vehicle had stayed intact, this would have been a totally different scenario. And so that has been on my mind actually for some time and has been part of my motivation for looking at a Tesla, especially back months ago when I was considering an X for my family with the 5 kids, and we'd need a total of 7 passengers. The thing that there was a day at work where I thought, okay, I'm going to do it tomorrow. I just have to do it tomorrow because I don't want these sorts of avoidable, injuries to happen to me when I know there's probably something that I could do about it. The next story is also a good one, a real positive thing, especially for someone like myself who's ordered a car, hasn't seen it, and where the car is just getting better and better. Verified now that it's got a 5-star safety rating. Now it has essentially built-in dash cam features. Obviously, the cars are well equipped to support this feature. The Autopilot 2 hardware, including all, I believe it's 7 or 8 cameras, I forget off the top of my head. But now you will have the ability to get at that. I believe Elon Musk tweeted out that it's coming in version 9 of the software. And what that will allow you to do is if someone damages your car, if you're in an accident and someone claims that, it went down this way and they're obviously lying to to protect themselves, obviously, you can go back. I don't know how this process will work if you just do it yourself or if you have to request it from Tesla, but they'll be able to go back and get these images and see. So if someone tries to steal your car or they just vandalize it, I saw pictures on Twitter of someone that had just essentially keyed. To me, it looked like they took a screwdriver to the roof of this Model 3 and just scratched the heck out of it. That would be an obvious one where you'd be able to pull up the picture. You'd be able to see exactly what the person looked like, how many people they were, which direction they went to, whether they pulled up in a vehicle or not. You'd probably be able to do that. So this is a great addition. This actually saves you quite a bit of money and adds value. If you were to add this type of feature on your own, first of all, you could only do dash cam, so you'd only really be able to get forward. I believe those systems run anywhere from $500 to $1,000 or more. And you wouldn't be able to really cover the perimeter of the car with cameras the way you can with the Tesla. So I think this is a great addition and just adds extra value. And they're not charging for it. They're not, as far as we know at this point, they're not saying this is an additional feature that you can purchase for $1,000 or whatever. They're just adding it to the next software upgrade, which I think is awesome. The next story is just one of these wild and weird, crazy things. And I found this one first on Business Insider. It almost sounds like the beginning of a Netflix episode where there's a drug enforcement agency plane flying around somewhere in Texas, actually in Sugar Land, Texas. And they were doing it, as it turns out, a flight training exercise, and somehow things went bad. Single engine Cessna plane apparently tried to land on the road, collided with several vehicles as it went down what's called Voss Road near Highway 6. And one of the vehicles involved was a Tesla Model X. Now, no one was injured as far as we know in the X. The DEA agent in the area for Houston said that the plane had some mechanical difficulties and they had to do an emergency landing. One of the cars was actually a white Model X, which looks like it just primarily has damage to the driver's side front. And Elon Musk actually did respond to this saying, wow, glad they're okay. And then I heard on the Tesla Daily podcast this morning, actually on my way here, that apparently when the driver of the X called Tesla to tell them what had happened, they either hung up on him or otherwise disregarded him because it sounded like a prank call. And it really is ridiculous. But this certainly could easily be an opening sequence for a new Netflix original series of Narcos or something like that. But anyway, pretty interesting story. But again, it sounds like no major injuries. Unfortunately, everyone is okay. And next up, this is audio from a fully charged video on YouTube where they rounded up some Model 3 owners and took a test drive and spoke with these guys. So the link for this will be in the show notes, and that is Johnny Smith, who basically came over and met with, from England, I believe, and met with some folks from the Denver Tesla Club. So there was 3 guys there that were basically, one was a first-time Tesla owner, the other had a couple of Teslas already, and I think the third guy also had Tesla, also had a Tesla wall charger unit, I'm blanking on, the Tesla battery pack, a power wall, and then he also had solar panels. So this guy was like fully invested. It's a really good look. The last part of it, he takes one of the guy's cars, Model 3, out for a drive, and there's some really good discussion. So definitely worth checking that out. I think it's really good, sort of candid discussion. And if you're like me, at first you probably thought that was Johnny Ive from Apple speaking, and I was kind of hoping he would say aluminium, but unfortunately he never did. right, and let's move on to today's topic, which is really going to encompass two things. First of all, it's EV charging for newbies like me. So I've done quite a bit of research on this, and also ties into the fact that my Model 3 is coming, and I'm going to give you an update that kind of ties into all this stuff as well. First of all, we'll kind of just back up to the very basics, and I'll do my best to kind of explain it as simply as I can. I know there's probably some subtleties to it and some things that maybe are not completely accurate. If I say anything that's just flat out wrong or really needs to be corrected, please just let me know. First of all, you essentially have four options to charge your vehicle. They range from, really slow to really fast, and there's trade-offs as you move through this. Option one, at least in the US, is your standard 110 volt wall plug. So you can use that. There's a little adapter. You can stick that on the end of the cable. I don't believe it comes with the Tesla in the original kit, but I'll have to check on that. But you can do that. You will get, this is very, very slow. You might get 4 to 5 miles per hour of charging. One of the things, which reminds me, one of the things that is a little bit confusing about this is there's lots of different terminology. And usually when you refer to miles per hour, we're talking about how fast you're going. But it's kind of commonly used in the charging world to say miles per hour, referring to how much charge you're getting, not just in terms of how many kilowatt hours you're putting into the battery, but in terms of what that equivalent range will be. So it may depend on your vehicle exactly how much power you're putting into the car. But in simple terms, it's easiest to talk about it in terms of miles per hour that you are putting back onto your battery. So that's option one, maybe 4, maybe 5 miles per hour with a standard outlet wall plug directly into your Tesla or EV of your choice, but we'll kind of keep it to Tesla here. The next option up is also something you'll find in your home. It's called a NEMA 1450. This is a 220 volt outlet, so basically double the power of your standard wall outlet in the US. This is what your dryer is hooked up to. There's also some heavy machinery, maybe some power equipment, construction, carpentry stuff that might also require a higher 220 volt outlet like this. This is a relatively simple thing to get added to your garage. Most people will need an electrician to get this done. And then I believe the adapter for this does come with the Tesla charging kit, that you get this little bag of charging cables from what I've seen. And I'm quite certain that the adapter for this does come in there. This will get you about, for anywhere from what I've seen, about 20 to maybe 30 miles per hour of charge. So maybe an average of about 25 miles per hour of charge. And so what this means is if you need to put on 100 miles of charge, and you plug your car in all night, if it's charging for, 4 or 5 hours, you'll get that easily. If you need to charge 200 miles, overnight, you're looking at probably leaving it, plugged in for 10 to 12 hours, something like that. So this is a very reasonable option. I think for most people that are commuting, the cost to get this installed could vary widely based on your location. There's this thing that I've now come to refer to, and I've heard from others about this. I had a listener to the show actually reach out to me about how some of the questions about charging and the relays and some of the things that we'll get into later. But I've noticed this as well. When I was originally getting bids, I was trying to avoid what we now call the Tesla tax. If you tell them you just need a 1450 outlet, I think you get a different price. If you tell them it's for my Tesla Model X, they, I think, rightly can sense that you may have deep pockets and they will jack up the price. And if they got a bunch of Tesla people, which is happening more and more from what I gather, I think the price is going to creep up on this, but it could be anywhere from $500 to $1,000. I think it could even be more depending on your particular situation and whether or not they need to do anything with the panel, where your circuit breakers and as the power enters to your house, or what your particulars of your situation are. And then moving on, option 3 is a Tesla wall connector. So this is still AC current from what I understand. And now we go up to anywhere from 208 to 277 volts. So you start at the wall outlet 110, then you go to the dryer outlet, the NEMA 1450 at 220. And now we're just going to split the difference. We're going to call it 240 here. But the difference here, now the voltage is not significantly different. The part that I think gets a little bit confusing is that voltage is not the only variable in here. So it's voltage times the current, which is the amperes, which is basically the circuit breaker will sort of limit the flow of current, the speed at which electrons and electricity will go through there. But this is sort of your next step up. So now with the Tesla wall connector, you're talking about a much faster option for home. And with this option, we are looking at charging rates of up to 44 miles per hour of charging on a Model 3. Model S goes up to 52 and Model X goes up to 45. And it seems like it sort of plateaus. Again, the voltage at 240 volts is what there's a table on Tesla's website. Then I'll post this on my Twitter feed so you can look at it yourself. You probably could also find it on Tesla's website, although it took me a few minutes to kind of dig through all this stuff. But basically, it depends on your circuit breaker. So you've got this amount of voltage, which is sort of like the pressure of electrons. And then it really depends on the resistance or I'm sorry, on the flow, the amperage, which is dependent on the resistance of how many electrons will go through there. So in the Model 3, it looks like it tops out at a 60 amp circuit breaker where after that point, it doesn't get any faster. Part of this, I think, has to do primarily with the capability of the charger on your vehicle to receive AC current. So it's another one of these confusing terms. The charger is actually not the connector. The connector is really just kind of a power plug, probably, to think of it. But the actual charger, the converter, the thing that takes AC, alternating current, and converts it to direct current, which is what the batteries are storing, that is actually the charger. But for conventional wisdom, or that's not really the right word, but for everyday life, everyone just refers to the plug-in cable to the thing as the charger. And then option 4 after that is a supercharger, which is basically moving up to very high voltage and also direct current. So from what I could find on the Wikipedia page, the Supercharger network currently is a 480 volt direct current system. So we started at 110 for the wall outlet, 220 for the dryer outlet, and then we were at like 240 to 270 or so for the wall charger. And again, that depends on your amperage. And now we're up to a 480 volt system, which is relatively expensive, requires some significant infrastructure. It's just not an option for home. But anyway, this is your next option. It does get a little bit complicated in that it's true with all the vehicles that when you plug it in, when you're talking about, let's say we had 25 miles per hour of charge rate with the NEMA 1450. You really don't get that, the whole way. As you get up to the top of your battery range, due to the amount of heat produced and it's just generally the fullness of the battery, there's a certain point where the amount of heat generated becomes excessive. And to preserve the battery chemistry and to keep the heat under control, the car will automatically slow down the rate of charging. So what that means is that at the low end, so when your battery is more empty, the capacity to fill it more quickly is better. So you will actually get a better charging rate when your battery is more empty than when it's mostly full. It actually slows down quite significantly when it's really full. And the way a Tesla reports this is that in ideal condition, so in the kind of the lower to middle range of your battery, you will get about 240 miles an hour of charge, or roughly 170 miles in 30 minutes. And they use that 30 minutes because that seems like a reasonable amount of time to have to stop at a supercharger. But it'll take, to get a full charge, it'll take about 75 minutes to an hour and a half. From everything I've read, there's definitely some variability in this. It also can depend on if someone is plugged into the same unit you're on. If they're on the same circuit, there's like an A side and a B side to some of these chargers. And if someone's on the A side and you plug into the B side, the A person will drop down their rate to accommodate you. So you're better off trying to stagger if possible. And I have no personal experience on this. I've only used a supercharger once and it was plenty fast. I didn't even really have any issues with it at all. But this is the fastest version. And then this is also where North Dakota and western Minnesota, but particularly North Dakota and north of us in Canada and Alberta, in Manitoba, there's definitely some issues here because this is the only really good option for making long road trips. Otherwise, you're talking about many hours or overnight stops, which in a gas-powered car in an ICE vehicle would simply be a stop at the gas station, and you're on your way in maybe 15 minutes if you stop to go to the bathroom and buy some snacks or a drink or something. So this is very important. Once you get the superchargers, I think you're still adding some time to your overall trip. But I'll continue to give you the Supercharger Dead Zone updates, and I'll wait until next month, which we can already anticipate is likely going to be the same. And I did try to do some research to see if I could kind of wrap my head around some of the physics behind how this all works. And it is fairly complicated. You can search on YouTube and you'll find a lot of things that I saw will reference this water analogy, referring to voltage as the power or the water pressure behind a pipe. And then the flow of electricity is dependent on the resistance or the size of the pipe. So if you have a very narrow pipe and a lot of pressure, you may have the water shooting out at a high speed, but the overall amount of water that's being transferred is very low. Think of it as like a water pick, very high current. It's coming out super fast, but at a very slow overall amount. So the amount of time that it would take to fill a gallon bucket of water with a water pick type of thing would take a long time, but the water's moving at a very high speed, and that's really what the current is. On the other hand, you can have a very low current situation and fill the bucket very fast if you had a much bigger pipe. If you just had, a 3-inch pipe and you were just pouring water through it, if you had enough water to just completely fill the pipe, you could fill that. The water itself isn't flowing very fast, but the volume of it that it's moving, the amount of energy, the amount of power that's going that you can put in this. In other words, you can fill the bucket faster at a lower speed of current, but at a higher volume. So I found that analogy somewhat helpful, but then it started to fall apart when they started talking about the difference between kilowatts and kilowatt hours. And, I ended up getting fairly confused. And, normally this is stuff that I would probably be able to understand. Maybe it's because I'm getting older. I got an A in physics in high school. I got an A in organic chemistry. I did well in physics in college. But I just found this topic to be a little bit confusing. And I think it was because if you start with this water analogy, it works for a while and then it breaks down and you have to throw it out. And some of the terminology gets a little confusing. If you're picturing the flow of water through a pipe, it stops making sense after a while. But that really wasn't my objective here. What I was trying to do was just keep it very simple. If you're a newbie like myself, what do you really need to know? And I think this sort of, for me, was most helpful. You can use a wall outlet. That's option number one. It'll work. It'll be really slow. If you have a short daily commute and you have a wall outlet, this will probably work for you. If you're in an area where there are superchargers and you want to go on a long trip, this will probably actually work for you, depending on your schedule and things like that. The next step up, option 2, would be a NEMA 1450 to 220 volt. That'll get you about 25 miles per hour of charge. This would be good for an overnight situation. You have a longer commute. If you drive, 60 to maybe 100 miles a day as part of your daily commute, and you're able to just plug in your vehicle every night, you should be just fine with that as well. If you wanted to do something a little bit faster, you could get a Tesla wall connector. You will need an electrician. There's extra expense with this, but this will give you up to about 40, maybe 50 miles per hour of charge. And then, of course, the Tesla Supercharger is your fastest option, but not really your best option for everyday use due to the speed of charging your battery and the fact that the more you supercharge it over time, that can cause more degradation of your battery. All right, so that took a lot longer to try to explain than I was hoping, and it is confusing. But let's try to move on. I did want to give you a quick update. I've had some communications with Tesla about getting my Model 3. So I'm recording this on Friday morning. I'll be picking up the car in the Minneapolis area on Monday morning at 11. At least that's the plan as of right now. So one thing I can say is that it's been a little bit confusing. I had mentioned earlier when I ordered the car, I somehow must have been on the wrong screen, or I missed something, and I missed the option to finance with Tesla. So this was July 1st, I immediately tried to call them. The expected wait time was over an hour, so I hung up. And then I sent them an email explaining that I do want to finance with them. Never heard back, kind of let some time go by until I started getting a little bit more concrete information about a delivery time. When I got my delivery window, I was still looking at September through November. And then they came in sort of early here. And then I started kind of getting a little bit anxious about getting this financing question answered. So I did receive my VIN about 4 or 5 days ago. And then Tuesday, so a few days ago, I emailed my my delivery scheduling assistant person at Tesla, who's been, really pretty good. But I did email and I said, look, I'm still waiting for the financing thing. And he's like, yeah, I'll forward that on to your delivery specialist. So then I waited a day or so, never heard anything. I called the store in Eden Prairie where I'm going to pick up the car, spoke with someone there, and they're like, no, that's your scheduling specialist that's supposed to take care of the financing. What's his name? I'll call him. So I was like, okay, I'll let that go. Then a little bit, probably another full day, probably overnight went by, and I still hadn't heard anything. So I called again. I talked to someone else who might have been the manager of the store and said he would talk to somebody. And then I finally did get someone to call me and speak with me on the phone and try to walk through this. And as it turns out, the reason I may not have actually made a mistake when I registered, but when I did the purchase thing online, as it turns out, there's no financing for Tesla in North Dakota. So I didn't have the option. And so now I'm kind of scrambling last minute, started the application last night online with my bank. I may not get the best rate, but I'm kind of short for time. I do have the option to just pay for it and finance it through a home equity, which wouldn't be the worst option either. But I really I'm a little bit miffed about how this kind of all went down, and that I'm kind of under the gun now. I won't really have any time to deal with this on Monday morning. And so I've got basically the rest of the day to sort of try to get this resolved. If I do end up just kind of paying for it and using a home equity loan, I can refinance it after the fact, I suppose. So that's kind of how things are going. It sounds like once you have your VIN number, things should go pretty smoothly. I'm a little bit nervous, as you might imagine, about getting there, getting myself to the cities, returning the rental car, Ubering over to the Tesla place, and then having some sort of problem where either the car's not ready or I'm missing something that I didn't know about or whatever. So, I've made myself a little checklist. I also will need to make a checklist to check the car, to look at panel gaps, the paint, the light lenses and all those other things to make sure everything's okay. So I will give you an update. On the charging part, as far as getting the garage ready, that part's gone pretty smoothly. I found a great electrician that's done a lot of work for Tesla owners here in Fargo, who's one of these rare guys that's on time. I mean, every time he says he's going to be here, he's there at least a couple minutes early. He's really good about communicating back and forth. He's a little more expensive than I like, but I think that's kind of the Tesla tax. It's kind of the price that you pay to get someone that's really professional with their work, but also is on time and shows up and doesn't kind of keep pushing you off, which is an issue I've had with other providers here in the area. And I've also heard feedback from listeners that they're experiencing the same issues. So anyway, longer show than normal. Let's try to wrap this thing up for this week. Thanks again for listening. I really do appreciate it. If you would like to reach out to me, you can send me an email on teslanewstopics@gmail.com. You can find me on Twitter at Tesla News Topics. Music for the show provided by Melodious Thunk. I do have a Tesla referral link that I'd like to share with you, which is ts.la/Jeff, Jeff 62003. Also, you can find me on Patreon if you feel like supporting the show financially in any way. It could be $1, $2, $5, whatever you feel like. Or nothing, just listen, that's fine too. Patreon.com/Tesla News Topics. Remember to subscribe on iTunes. Please leave a positive review and tell your friends. Once again, thanks for listening. The next time we talk, I should have a Model 3, fingers crossed, in my garage. Have a great week, everybody.